Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa bihi nasta'een. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Inshallah, this will be the fourth talk in the stages of the Wayfarer, the Manazil of Khawaja Abdulla Ansari. I will not make the usual extensive introduction because I would hope that most of you by this time have gotten into the flow of things, as it were. For those who are new to the talks, there might be one or two. I'll be very happy to give a short brief later. So we're now at the fourth stage of the Manazil, and I have to stress once again that we're talking about stages and stations for those who are seeking the inner dimensions. Most of the names and titles that you will come across, especially now, have their manifestations in the outer realm too. And in fact, we are more used to them in the outer realm because they are in many ways, the core of outer ethics. But you should not conceive of them as being simply mirror images. When we talk about the virtues of patience, for example, or truthfulness, or excelling in the qualities of character, we would tend to know, by and large, what they mean colloquially. When you say somebody is patient, we have an idea what that means, and we can empathize or sympathize and experience some or most of these states. But in the inner dimension, which is what we're talking about today and earlier and also in the future talks on the various manazils, the stages, the inner meaning of these terms, of these states, takes on a different color, a different hue. And it is really important that we understand that it is not always inverted. It's not always that the outer forms have to be inverted in the inner context. But in many cases that would be the situation. The fourth stage is the one that the Khawaja calls the stage of the akhlaq. And the word akhlaq means, for the lack of a better word, ethics. I don't think ethics quite summarizes the entire manifestations of the term akhlaq. Akhlaq is derived from the word khalaqa, which is to create, from which are derived many other terms. Akhlaq can mean ethics. It can mean these days simply good manners. Words like khuluq is derived from akhlaq, which is a word for the quality of a person's character. Khallaq is an innovator. So it has an element in it of creation, of creativity, of bringing into being, bringing into existence. And it is from that point, I think, that you have to view the perspectives of the Khawaja on the internal ethics, the inner ethics that determine the various doors and stages of the fourth landing. All of these stages are to do with perfecting knowledge of the One. The last door of the last stage is the door of unity, of unicity, where you see the One and only the One, where you are driven by the One and only the One, and where your goal, where your leaning is to the One and only the One. And all of these are doorways in order to create within oneself those qualities that allow the self to become so luminous and lustrous that it can merge with the soul, which is the locus of the perfected qualities inside a being, inside any being. In the case of human beings, it's the locus of conscious awareness of oneness. In the case of inanimate beings, it is embedded in their existential blueprint, as it were. They are in unity or in unicity without the need to articulate it, without the need to express it, without the need to have a consciousness about it. The consciousness of human beings is that element that allows for the self to move towards the soul. Inanimate beings do not have that element, but they still have in their totality the knowledge of unity. Usually in all of the stages, all of the Manazil, Ansari paraphrases it in a very succinct or pithy way at the beginning of discussions that he has on the various stages. And here in the note that I've circulated, I put all of Ansari's verbatim translations in red, so for ease of reference. And his summation of the stage of ethics is: ethics are conditions of the self from which emanate instinctive actions and which reinforce the quality of a person's transactions. Persistence in ethical actions only strengthens the fount of these actions in the self, smoothing the emergence of virtues and goodness along the path. My commentary on that, my observations on that summation of the Khawaja, is that really ethics in their inner dimension, as well as I might add in their outer dimension, but that's another. Ethics in the outer dimension is to do with perfecting the qualities by which the pathway, the outer pathway to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes manifested and realized. Ethics of the inner dimension are the foundational blocks of the self trying to realize its potential of being luminous. So it is not something that is incidental to the path. They are really central and fundamental to it. And in many ways, this is an inflection point in the path of the Wayfarer. That is, the ethical dimension of inner conduct is the means by which the Wayfarer, he or she, is able to create, as it were, a firm and broad foundation which then allows the person to move on to the next stages. And it is not, as I said earlier, it is not a set of moral rules that deal with certain responses to societal demands. It's not do-gooding in that sense. Ethics of the inner way, they may have an element of do-gooding. They may have an element of being faithful to moral precepts, but they are more than that, and they're also other than that. They're basically, as I see them, they are expressions of the actions of the divine names in the realm of existence. When the divine names, which are the core of all entities, of all beings, of all reality, everything in existence reflects a divine name. And every action reflects a divine name. Every state reflects a divine name. And these divine names, which are infinite, we know in the Quran there are hundreds, some mentioned, but they are really infinite because they are the names by which things are called and the names by which their essences are realized. Human beings have two aspects to them. Everything has two aspects to it. Everything in being has two aspects. There's an inner being, which is the realm of meaning, the realm of substance, the realm of reality, and there is the outer form in which that is expressed. And the names have also these two functions. They are expressed in the outer form, in the form of action, in the form of condition, in the form of states, but they're expressed in the inner form as pointers to the one. So when we talk about the divine names as being the core of ethics, ethics in the inner realm are rooted in the divine attributes. We talk about the attribute of patience, which I'll come back to because it is the first door of the stage of ethics. It is really an expression of the actions and of the reality of the all-patient. It is one of the names that Allah gives to Himself, Al-Sabur. And it is in their inner and outer expressions. The names propel, as it were, drive the self towards the one reality. So the first door of the stage of inner ethics is the stage of the door of patience and sabr. And as is usual in all of his introductions to these doors, Ansari begins with a Quranic quote or Quranic verse, ayah. And here he quotes from Quran, Surah 16, ayah 127, "Be patient, for none gives you patience but Allah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa asbir, wa ma sabraka illa billah." And he says, again, quoting verbatim, "Patience is holding the self from expressing its resentments and complaints. It is one of the most difficult stages for the common people, the most solitary in the path of love, and the most unrequited towards unicity. It is of 3 degrees, and these 3 degrees are always referred to as the divisions of people into the amma or the common. By common I don't mean the vulgar or vulgate, but it is those whose capacities reach a certain level, and that level is shared by a very large number of people. So for the first degree, patience in the inner way is to cease engaging in transgressions because of the certainty of the rewards that one receives in consequence. So many people tolerate or accept a kind of burdensome condition because of the belief that there is a reward or some gain, spiritual gain to be earned at the end of the day. And he says, however, better than this type of patience is the one that is driven by modesty and shamefacedness from committing transgressions. So rather than be patient with committing an act that you know is an act that leads to a block or an obstacle on the path of realization, you would not commit it because you may lose rewards. You do not commit it because of your shamefacedness if you commit it. The second degree of patience is patience in obedience while respecting the norms of obedience. And the third stage is patience with afflictions while awaiting release from them and accepting their burdens by constant remembrance of the graces that have been bestowed on you. The weakest type of patience is patience with Allah's commands. That is, you are patient because this is Allah's command. Above it is a state of patience that is bestowed on you by Allah's grace. So patience becomes a state, a condition from which you respond instinctively. And above all, it is patience on Allah's commands. That is, you are patient as a result of your immersion or dissolution in Allah's commands. And this is the patience of the Wayfarer. I think, obviously, the Khawaja is speaking 1,000 years ago, and where it's not that his understanding of patience is incomplete, but there's a different dimension to it that I would like to discuss. And my own understanding of what is the meaning of patience, what is the reality of patience in its inner dimension, it is to do actually with the suspension of time. Because if you think about it, to be patient with someone or something is to allow the passage of time to shrink between the condition that gives rise to the exercise of patience and its elimination or its disappearance. So the element of time is essential for you to exercise the virtue of patience. If time shrinks to zero, patience becomes infinite. So infinite patience, which is what Allah's patience is therefore the abandonment of time while we are wayfaring. The wayfarer, he or she, cannot measure states by time. Once you use the yardstick of time and space, you cease to be what I would call a spiritual warrior. You become, your referential point becomes the outer meaning, the outer reality of patience. So that understanding of patience removes the element of burdensomeness or the element of suffering that we all link somehow to patience. When you're patient with something, there's always a sense that there's a cost attached to it. And that cost can be, you can end up in suffering, but it's a burden. It's something that is weighty. But so if time is removed from that scale, and both the scale of the action and the responses to it, patience therefore becomes really a vital, essential quality for the inner wayfarer. Not in the sense of suffering or quietly accepting the burden, but in the sense of allowing time to whittle away in your assessment of actions and their responses to them. So this ability to suspend and shrink time is critical if you want to stay on the pathways of realization. Without it, if you keep on falling to the idea of patience as being a burden or as being somehow to be requited or relieved at a point in time, then you have basically missed its meaning. Now, the Khawaja, in some ways, has in his understanding, on his interpretation, there is a sense of effort and burdensomeness in it too. But Allah, the all-patient, is where passage of time goes to zero, and therefore the expansiveness becomes infinite. From patience we move to contentment, the doorway of contentment, Rada. And here the ayah that the Khawaja talks about is, and return to your Lord, contented and being contented with. This is from Surah Al-Fajr, the last ayah. And any of you who visits loved ones who are in graveyards and so on, there's always, on most cases, it's written on the headstone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, where the ayah starts, Ya ayyatuha nafs al-mutma'inna, and then it goes on, Irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah, fadkhuli fi ibadi wadkhuli fi jannati. The full ayah is, O serene self, return to your Lord, contented and being contented with. Enter into my servitude and enter into my garden. Ansari says, contentment is the halting point of the sincere ones. It neither increases nor decreases, does not speed up or slow down. It is not displaced or moved. It is the beginning of the progress of the select amongst the wayfarers and the most difficult for those beginners. It is a stage of equanimity, according to Ansari. Doesn't go up, doesn't go down. It's a state of perfect equilibrium, of balance. It has no shifts in the scale. For the common folk, contentment is the acceptance of Allah as the only focus of worship. It is the cornerstones of the outer forms of Islam that Allah is the most beloved to the worshipper and the most worthy of exaltation and obedience. For the select, he defines contentment is what effulges or emanates from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is with this contentment that the wayfarer observes the signs of manifestation. It is the acceptance and acknowledgement of all that has transpired. Basically, it is a recognition of where you are at this moment in time or in this condition, in this state, is a sign of pure perfection. And you can be nothing but be contented with perfection. How can you question perfection? The third stage is the most difficult to internalize, because it's actually to do with abandonment of contentment. You're no longer content, but you're content with Allah's contentment with you. So whatever Allah's contentment with you, you're content. So you transcend contentment. And the wayfarer sees no difference then between contentment and its absence, between reward and punishment, because they're all Allah's decrees and effulgences. Who are you to have the state or the desire for contentment? And you, at that point, you cease to exercise. He says the wayfarer ceases to exercise judgments on people and events because of their perfection. Here, my commentary is that contentment in its outer form has a positive quality, but in many ways it's also seen as sort of lacking outer ambition. This person is contented doing nothing. But as I said, in most things, and I say in all things, but in most things of the inner world, you have to invert the meaning of the condition to see what it really means in the inner dimension. Contentment, in its highest degree, as I see it, is the condition of observing and marveling at the perfection of all that has transpired. Shaykh Allah has written a book called Witnessing Perfection. And it is really to do with that. It is to do with seeing the past, events of the past, as being not ordained, but everything falls into a kind of very intricate, infinite layered matrix with infinite sides. But everything is in place. So you are in no position to question why things have happened, because they have happened. Now, of course, I'm talking about the inner reality. You have to question things in its outer form. You have to try to set things right. You have to try to move towards what is correct, what is in the greater interest of human beings. But in the inner world, and in the world which encompasses both the inner and the outer worlds, what is because of Allah's decrees. So the perfection of marveling at the perfection of what has transpired is rooted in the knowledge of Allah's realities, commands, decrees, and omnipotence. It is the act of constantly witnessing the perfected conditions, and can only reach to a state of marvel and astonishment. Now this quality of marveling is a feature of contentment, because You're in absolute equilibrium in the inner world. And you marvel at how this infinite, complex, multi-layered universe of actions, of states, of supposed actors, of movers, of spirits, of things, of entities, of meanings, how all of that fits in a very, very perfected and in a cosmic neatness to it, as it were. And when that happens, you have to go into gratitude, which is the third door, which is shukr. And the Quran says, and few who worship me are in gratitude. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَقَلِيلٌ مِّنْ عِبَادِي الشَّكُورُ. Ansari says, gratitude is the name given to knowledge of the bounties. And that is why Allah has called faith and Islam a form of gratitude. Islam here, it is not just the religion of Islam. It is the primordial religion. It is the religion that encompasses all pathways, all legitimate pathways, all established pathways to reality. It is the pathway of submission. So the name gratitude is given once you know Allah's bounties. That the process of knowing and recognizing and acknowledging is in fact gratitude. The meaning of gratitude is to know the graces, accept the graces, and then to acknowledge the graces. And gratitude is of 3 degrees, he says. Gratitude to the beloved. And all people who have pathways, who share a pathway to the singularity and unicity of the One, have this gratitude. And he says Muslims share this with all monotheists. For the select, gratitude in adversity, when things go wrong, when things go bad, both in the inner and the outer world, you are still in gratitude. Because you are contented. And that gratitude obliges you to hide hardship, to cover up complaints, and maintain courteous conduct throughout. But gratitude of the highest order is where the bond person, I couldn't find a better word for al-abd, because slave is not the right word. It is to be in a state of willing bondage. You only see the bestower of bounties. You only see that bounties are from one. So there is no question of adversity, there's no question of elation. And it becomes more and more marvelous. Your gratitude becomes marvelous as you compare your absolute impoverishment to Allah's absolute, or to reality's absolute bounty. So even the most constricted condition become in effect an effulgence or an emanation of reality's love and mercy. So my take on that is that gratitude is when the self acknowledges bounties, but at the same time asks the question, where do these bounties end? They don't end. So acknowledging them is acknowledging, as it were, the obvious. And the Quran says, and if you try to count the bounties of Allah, you will surely fail. So it's a stage. You have to attain it, but you have to quickly go beyond it, because it is, in some ways, it is acknowledgement of the obvious. You're in gratitude, but of course you're in gratitude because all emanations are by their nature the source of gratitude. And again, the Quran said, whoever is thankful, it is for that person's benefit, and whoever covers up this reality, Allah is the all-sufficient, the all-praiseworthy. It's Allah Himself who says you have to state the obvious and move on. The fourth door is the door of effacement, or the door of modesty. The word haya in Arabic has in it also a liveliness about it. So it's not just sort of shrinking violet type thing. It is an active modesty. It is not a passive modesty. It is not a passive condition. And he starts by the ayah, and does he not know that Allah is watching? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alam ya'lam bi-an Allah yara. Does he not know that Allah is watching? So your modesty and your effacement is derived from your knowledge that the all-seeing, al-Sami' al-Basir, the all-listening, the all-seeing, is watching. I mean, not watching over you as big brother, but the reality of the all-seeing must become part of your equipment in the inner journey. Effacement deriving is of 3 degrees. The first one is effacement deriving from the knowledge that the truth is watching. It allows the wayfarer to bear his or her responsibilities and his burdens and not to countenance complaining. The second degree of effacement derives from the knowledge that the truth is ever proximate. He's not just watching, but he is nearer to you than your jugular vein, driving the wayfarer to love and towards the soul inside. An effacement of the third degree derives from witnessing the divine presence and marveling in awe at truth's majesty that is indivisible. Modesty in the wayfarer is knowledge of the certainty of truth's presence and proximity. The haqq, the reality of Allah's all-encompassing presence and being. That knowledge and the acknowledgement of that knowledge pushes a person to recognizing not the insignificance, but the immateriality of one's intellect, of one's consciousness, in light of this immense presence. And it imposes on one a sense of effacement. You have to efface the knowledge that in your actions, in your thoughts, in your being, that your independence is anything but conditional. And this knowledge humbles a person, and it obliges one to retreat in the face of the overwhelming presence, leaving the self aware of its essential limitations and conditionality. And the modesty that emerges, or the effacement that emerges, is not only good, salutary for the wayfarer in his path, but you recognize that modesty, which in these days where it is seen to be in fact a vice in the public arena, it's in fact a fit and proper condition in the private inner world. Because you dissolve your will, your sense of individuality dissolves into the divine presence. In other words, in another way, I see it as the retreat of the self in front of the soul. The self faces the soul throughout your life. Sometimes it tries to dominate it, sometimes it ignores it, sometimes it succumbs to it. Self is ever perfect. The soul is ever perfect, Self is ever changing. And modesty of the self is a way in which the self begins to shed its defenses in front of the soul. And in other words, it puts things in their appropriate place and condition. This moves us to the door of sidq, or truthfulness. And again, truthfulness in the inner world is not just not telling lies. That's of course is necessary, but the inner world you lie to yourself. So it's far more dangerous than lying in the outer world. And he quotes the ayah from the Quran, and when matters are grave, it would be best for them to have faith in Allah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فإذا حزم الأمر فلو صدقوا الله لكان خيرا لهم. Ansari says, truthfulness is a name given to the reality of things as they originate and exist. It's basically a confirmation that the existence and being of entities in their inner core, in their jawhar, in their inner essence, that acknowledgement is truthfulness. Because the juxtaposition of truth against lies doesn't exist in reality. There's only truth in reality. Lies or non-exist are the absence or the withdrawal of acknowledgement of the truth. There's no condition called lying in the inner world, like there's no condition of evil in the inner world. It is only the absence of good. The absence of knowledge of things, unwillingness to say things as they are, gives rise to what we call lies, or it's a form of cover, it's a form of rejection of the truth, or a non-acknowledgement of it. So truthfulness in Ansari is again of 3 degrees. The first one is to confirm why you're on this journey. You have to be truthful that the purpose of this journey is something to which your entire self is oriented. And this allows the wayfarer to deflect distractions and to build, he says, to build on the ruins. And by the ruins he means the ruins of the commanding self. If you look at the spectrum of the self, you start from the lowest form, the animal self, the commanding self, and then it goes to the self that is perplexed, then the self that becomes aware, and the self that becomes luminous, and the self that becomes serene, and the self that becomes contented, and the self, etc. There's a spectrum. So the first step in truthfulness is to abandon the commanding self. So it's no longer as part of your pattern. It's no longer, it may pop up from time to time, but it's like a headache pops up from time to time. It's not your permanent state. The second form of truthfulness is to confirm and to acknowledge that the source of life is the truth. And the wayfarer only witnesses what is lacking in him and hers. There's nothing except perfection. Wherever there is a lack, it is in the person. That is a form of sidq, that's a form of truthfulness. The last condition is again a paradoxical one, because you go beyond truthfulness by acknowledging that the knowledge of truthfulness is like a complex that you believe in. But you are truthful in knowing that, so you know that once and for all, and that you move on, so that your actions and your conditions are in concordance with reality, with the commands and decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They become not only reconciled, they become concordant. Once you're in that state, then whatever you do has in it the core of truthfulness. Of course, there's a big risk here, because people think that they are on this journey, on this path, and they have made a commitment to it. And they put on the mantle of truthfulness. In many ways, if you put that mantle on falsely, that is, if you have not experienced these confirmations of truthfulness, your works become, or your actions become not praiseworthy, blameworthy, and your sincerity becomes falsehood. That's what he says. And the limits of your quest is the best thing for you is just to lie down and forget about it. In more modern parlance, I would say more contemporary ways of approaching the state or the door of truthfulness is to think of it as that it's a form of reconciliation, to bring into concordance, to bring into accordance, to bring into balance and harmony intention, action, purpose and meaning. When these are put in balance, there's no way in which you are not then a sadiq, a truthful person. And when these are in unison, then the wayfarer is truthful. When purposes, intentions, meanings and actions are all in harmony with each other, all reinforce each other, then your actions, your condition, your state is becomes truthful. And knowledge and experience, direct experience of the divine reality, in and of itself leads to truthful action. And truthful action is a necessary concomitant, as it were, with knowledge and certainty. So it's like a circle. Knowledge of reality, confirmation of reality, truthful action is bound to lead you back to it. It goes around and around. It becomes like a virtuous circle. The next door is the door of ithar. Now, ithar is a peculiar Arabic word. It means giving preference to others. It means to prefer others to yourself. Who, even when needy, prefer them, the others, to themselves. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَيَأْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةً. Here, the ithar, or giving preference, Ansari is very equivocal about it, I must say. He insists that it is something that can only be done voluntarily. So it's an exercise of free will, free choice. It is not a praiseworthy condition if it's forced upon a person. If you're forced to give preference to another, if your parents tell you you have to share your chocolates or your whatever toys with your brother or sister, in the inner world, in the inner reality, this is a form of compunction. When if it's done voluntarily, then it moves to the level of ithar. The first stages of giving preference to others is to prefer generally existent beings, creation, to yourself, in matters that do not imply contravening the demands and decrees of reality. And here he means essentially the Sharia. That you must not allow others, you must not defer to others when it comes to matters of acting out Allah's commands and decrees. And any person who tries to block your journey and wastes your time, he or she cannot be given preference in the inner realm. The second degree of giving preference is to prefer Allah's contentment with you over the contentment of all others, even if one's burdens are amplified, even if one's needs are increased and afflictions are augmented. And the last stage of preference for the select, as it were, is in fact to prefer what Allah prefers. So your preference for others ceases to be others. Others do not feature into your spectrum of preferences, because you have surrendered your right to preference to whatever Allah prefers. The reason, he says, is because the notion of preference implies in it an element of dominion over what is being preferred. So you're offering something, you're giving away something. The presumption is that you own that thing, or you own that state. The reality is that you don't own it. So it's best to abandon the notion of having the right to prefer something when the right is not yours by right, as it were. It comes by bestowal. So it is the abandonment, as it were, of abandonment. You abandon preference, and then abandoning the abandonment of preference is the path of the realized wayfarer. The comment that one makes here is really to do with the actions and the conditions in the outer realm of the Prophet's Ansar, or helpers in Medina, when they were faced with the mass of migrants coming in from Mecca, the Muhajirun. It's also quite, I suppose, relevant in today's terms too. And here there are many ayahs regarding the virtues and the virtuousness of taking in others, making them feel at home, giving them comfort, giving them succor. And of course, in the inner realm, it applies to who are the Ansars, who are the helpers in the inner realm, and who are the migrants in the inner realm. The migrants are, of course, is the self, as it migrates from one condition, one state to the next. It moves. It moves terrain, moves from one landscape to the next. So, giving preference, here I'm not quite convinced by Ansari's placing it at such a high level. Primarily because it's something that requires the element of choice and the element of will. And if the element of will begs the question, where is the will from? What is the source of your willpower? So there's a slight issue there that one can have with it. However, the seventh door, the door of character or ethical deportment, khuluq, and he starts with the well-known ayah in the Quran, and you are of a character most noble. This is Allah speaking to the Prophet, addressing the Prophet. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. He says, character or ethical deportment is what reflects of the attributes onto the wayfarer. This is an extremely subtle point. Whatever the soul in the self is able to impart of its essential character to the self, that flow in itself is a source of ethical deportment. So the more you are able to reflect the qualities of the divine names and attributes in their essential form, the more the quality of your character begins to rise. And he says it has been agreed, he says, of course, amongst the spiritual leadership of the time, that practical gnosis is in fact the basis of character. So in some ways, Sufism or Tasawwuf, which is what he means by practical gnosis, al-ma'rifah al-amaliyah he calls it. I don't know why he doesn't just call it Tasawwuf, but that seems to be his preferred way. Maybe because it would have created some problem with some of his followers who may not have acknowledged that they were on the path of Tasawwuf. So, but it means the same thing. That in as much as Tasawwuf is rooted in perfecting the qualities of ethical deportment, then its practical or its outer manifestations is the basis of the characters of nobility, as it were. It revolves around the axes of the humility of the Gnostic and foregoing any harm. And three qualities affirm that: knowledge, generosity, and patience. Once again, he says it's of three degrees. High character implies that you know that created beings are constrained by their capabilities, limited by their powers, and curtailed in their will and action by their destinies. this is when you are dealing with both with the, here I'm talking about the soul when it looks at the self, or the luminous soul looking at the residual elements of its commanding self. That there are, you have to be charitable. You have to accept that conditions and people have flaws and faults, that they have limitations to them. And once you accept and acknowledge that and imbibe that, the quality of your character becomes softer, becomes more open to the finer, subtler elements. The second degree by which the quality of character is enhanced is when you face the haqq, when you face the truth, you are aware that whatever emerges from you is tentative, it's hesitant. And whatever comes from the truth, from reality, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, demands gratitude and loyalty. That relationship leads necessarily to enhancement of the quality of the character. The last stage, he says, is to acquire higher qualities of character through the purification of character. And that is through exercises, through routines, spiritual routines, by which the elements that stop or hinder the progress of the self, of the wayfarer, drop by. And my comment is that if Sufism is a practical manifestation of the acquisition of inner knowledge, then dealing with created beings becomes the leitmotif of the wayfarer, the touchstone of the wayfarer for the highest potential form of ethical deportment. Qualities of character become therefore the outer realization of the divine names and attributes. The Prophet said, take on the characteristics of Allah. تَخَلَّقُوا بِأَخْلَاقِ اللَّهِ. And really in the simplest form, what does that mean? That when you greet people, you use the word salam. Assalamu alaikum. Salam is peace. It's one of Allah's names. You praise by invoking that praise belongs to the praiseworthy. You thank by invoking the thankful. Al-Shakur. So, whenever you reflect or manifest a condition, a state, in its inner form and in its outer form, when you address people, when you are within company, the recognition that the driving force behind your actions, the driving force behind your states, is one of Allah's names, and you reflect that, you express that, you acknowledge that. So 99.99% recurring when people say Assalamu alaikum is a figure of speech, but for those wayfarers who are rooted and committed to the journey of the inner way, when you use the word as-salam, it has in it a very, very high degree of cognition that you are bestowing the peace of the all peaceful onto others through you as the agent. So you're also aware that every created entity has in it, him, her, it, the qualities of the divine names. And when you approach them, you're acknowledging that. Of course, it gives you also, it doesn't mean that you shirk from putting things aright, or you shirk from doing your duties and responsibilities. But it is always with the knowledge that your actions are rooted in the appropriate divine name and attribute that is within a proper order and a proper hierarchy. And the whole panoply of divine names is they're ordered hierarchically. And this order of preference becomes then the basis by which the wayfarer conducts himself or herself, with himself and with creation. And in the broader sense, it it includes human beings, the natural environment, the cosmos. The linkage of action, states, intent, and meaning back to their root becomes the highest form of ethical deportment. The eighth door is the door of tawadhu, or reticence, diffidence. And the Quranic ayah that governs this door, this landing, is that the true servants of the All-Merciful are those who walk the earth in humility. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا. He defines diffidence very, very short, in very short sentence. Diffidence is to bow in front of the power and force of the truth. It's not to shrink away, to bend your head, to sit skulk in a corner. It's to do with, in the inner realm, is to do with bowing in front of the power and force of the truth. It's again of 3 degrees. The first one is reticence or diffidence in the face of, I call the deen rather than use the word religion, because the deen is far more encompassing than the word religion. Also, religion has some the name itself raises a lot of issues. Deen is far more accommodating, far more encompassing. You should not be argumentative towards the sacred text, nor adopt a stand that is defamatory or accusatory, nor choose the path of opposing its tenets. The second degree of diffidence or reticence is to accept in companionships brothers and sisters on the path of wayfaring, to be just and right with your enemies, and to accept the excuses of the ones seeking forgiveness. And the third degree is to defer always to the truth, the haqq. Retreat from your own justifications and to relinquish whatever reward you might expect from your work or service. Here, I don't think that this is a satisfying explanation. These various 3 stages have too much of reticence, is too much defined by commitments to outer realities. That doesn't mean that it's erroneous. It's just not complete. Reticence to me is a form of spiritual hesitancy. It reflects that there are inner boundaries for one's conduct, and that there is an incomplete knowledge. Your knowledge of things is incomplete. By its very essence, is incomplete. So it is courteous. Courtesy is imposed upon you when you know that you have boundaries and you have limitations to your knowledge. And it is courteous to conditions and states that you have not yet achieved. You cannot claim to be where you are not. This sense of hesitancy, if you are at one stage in your spiritual advancement or in your path, you cannot claim the reality of being in a different stage, in a different landing. You're aware of their existence, you're aware of their reality and aware of the truth, but you have not experientially reached that. So there's a certain element of hesitancy when you talk about what is outside of your boundary. Of course, you are pushing the boundary all the time, but you have to know the boundary. And you have to know that your knowledge is incomplete. So the spiritual hesitancy, the flip side of the coin to it is spiritual arrogance. And in the sense that you believe there's a completeness to your state and to your condition. This, of course, negates the whole purpose of the journey. And it is reticence or diffidence internally is the condition of the wayfarer as he or she acknowledges and accepts the existence of spiritual hierarchies. There is a hierarchy in existence, and to be truthful, as you said to yourself, is one of the conditions of understanding and acknowledging their path. The ninth door is the door of futuwa, chivalry, nobility. Now, this I can go on about that because it is one of the organizing principles of Islamic life, or was anyway. He quotes here from the Quran, "There were youths who believed in their Lord and whom we increased in guidance." Ansari says, "The essence of spiritual nobility is not to see in yourself any preference, nor that yourself has any rights. You don't have any preference because of the virtue of your being, of your state, of your condition, and the self has no rights." Of course, this jars with the contemporary mind, which only talks about rights. But rights exist only in the sense of duties towards others are not fulfilled. You have a right on others if their duty to you is unfulfilled. It's again a kind of inversion of the rights and duties, the binary condition of rights and duties. There's no intrinsic right. Self has no intrinsic rights. Rights are bestowed on it. So its first port of call is the duty to acknowledge that these rights are bestowed on it. It is of 3 degrees. Spiritual nobility is to leaving enmity and ignoring insults and forgetting harm done to you. In many ways, this reflects the teachings of the great prophets. All the great prophets. Turning the other cheek is part of that. The second stage is drawing near to the person who is trying to undo you, to honor the one who is trying to hurt you, and to apologize to one who is causing you harm. And the third stage is not to give justifications for your actions or to tarnish your responses by preaching. Futuwa, or nobility of action and intentions, I think are the hallmarks of the spiritual warrior. And in the realm of Islam, the world of the religion of Islam, Islamic civilization, the peak of spiritual chivalry and nobility is Imam Ali alayhi salam. And out of all the 12 largest Sufi orders, 11 of them place the Imam at the top of the hierarchy. And there's a well-known attribution to Imam Ali that he was the original fata. The word fatuwa derives from the singular word fata, which means a youth. And futuwa is the selfless, noble actions of enlivened youth. In the Quran, it's applied to Prophet Ibrahim and to the people of the cave, Ahlul Kahf. And in outer practice, it requires the evolution of the self towards the highest spiritual qualities represented by the soul. And it is a form again of melding intention, effort and action. The nobility of intention, effort and action is a function of the degree in which you mirror the divine qualities. So in its outer reality, Futuwa was, in fact, as I was saying earlier, was the guild system, the entire economic order of the world of Islam was girded together by these guilds, which combined within them both devotion, work towards enlivening and improving and elevating the self in its spiritual journey. So work had a very profound spiritual / sacred side to it. And the organization of work, the organization of the workplace, the whole system of apprenticeship, of masters and apprentices, girded the Islamic world order until maybe 100 years ago. And of course it was undermined and then replaced by these horrible things like trade unions and so on. But the sense, the rupture between work and the meaning of work became, I think, final. The last door that Khawaja talks about in the stage of ethical deportment or akhlaq is the door of expansiveness, the door of joyfulness, inbisat. And he quotes from the Quranic ayah, "Will you destroy us now for what the retrogrades amongst us have done? This is nothing but a trial from you." Ansari says expansiveness and bisat is to dispatch grief, to avoid the solitude of humility, and it is to march with the upright. The 3 degrees that he mentions, the first is to be expansive with human beings, with created beings. Not to isolate yourself from them, but to engage them with your virtuous self and to tolerate them or to teach them with your qualities of character. Second degree is expansiveness with the truth, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's not to be stopped by fear, nor lulled by excessive hope, nor allowing any human being to enter between you and your Lord. And the third stage of expansiveness is, again paradoxically, by rolling up expansiveness. You enfold your joy in the expansiveness of the truth most high. Your sense of elation dissolves into the greater al-basit, the most expansive. Allah calls himself in the Quran al-basit. Expansiveness, my commentary on that is that it's a condition of limitless joy that expresses itself by an ease and serenity in dealing with created beings, secure in the knowledge of the One. And this is best articulated by, I think, Surah 94 in Shirah in the Quran. It's a very short surah. Have we not soothed your heart? Have we not relieved you of the burden that weighed upon your back? Have we not exalted your renown? With hardship comes ease. With hardship comes ease. And when your work is done, turn to devotion and make your Lord your sole quest. The risk of being in that stage, there's a risk to it too, is that you neglect the boundaries. The nature of expansiveness is to spill over, is to overflow. And you have to always contain. But contain to the maximum of containment, not contain in a constricted way. Contain within the limits of expansiveness. Otherwise, I believe you may have a false sense of freedom and empowerment. In the end, the summary or the summation of this stage, I go back to what I said at the beginning, is that akhlaq, I think they are the essence of goodly conduct. I don't want to say godly conduct in the outer form. Akhlaq become the basis, the ethics become the basis by which you discriminate or differentiate between the accepted, the prohibited, the good, and the not good. And I think also the ethical understanding of the Sharia, as it were, is an essential element in its practice. And ethics ultimately come down to the condition of the self. There's of course societal ethics that has a different dynamic, but the ethics of the self express themselves inwardly through the perfection of these qualities: patience, contentment, gratitude, effacement, etc. In their outer form, they become a mechanism by which you gauge the appropriateness of and the timeliness of decrees, of commands, that are subject to variation and change in their essential character. It becomes a way of understanding the world and the way of orientating yourself to the world, while rooted in the knowledge of the One. In the inner world, in the inner kingdom that we all have, which has its own king, its own viceroy, its own enforcers, its own laws, its own judges. There's a world inside. And this inner kingdom must also have a fulcrum. And that the precision of that fulcrum is the ethical deportment, the ethical basis. The more one is attuned to the ethical foundations of inner conduct, the more the balance, the discriminating quality becomes honed, as it were, and the more it becomes able to differentiate, discriminate, as well as to move on. And inshallah, this will bring us to the next discourse. Thank you for listening.
Patience is a very big elaboration on patience.
Mine or Ansari's, or both. Well, I'll go back, and he says that patience is holding the self from expressing its resentments and complaints. He sees it as mainly a kind of corral, as it were. You put a circle, you put a boundary around what causes you resentments and complaints and unsettles you. And that is the definition of patience. He defines patience, I suppose, in a negative way. That it is the process by which you limit or eliminate the effects of untoward things, untoward events, untoward people, anything that disturbs your equanimity. And
trials and tribulations,
yes,
afflictions.
Anything that causes disturbance and needs to be remedied is an exercise of the virtue of patience. Of course, the purpose of patience are the same. And I think from that point of view, you obviously need to have that quality. You need to see patience in terms of setting, as it were, of the containment or the container for the trials and tribulations. It's a form of encirclement and a form of coping. But I see it more in terms of time.
So yours is very profound. So before you
no,
get
it's
to
not
that,
profound, but it's mine.
This one. Be patient. You picked one ayah from the Quran. The Quran is full of patience ayahs.
I don't know why he picked this one. I mean, sometimes some of his ayahs appear on the surface not to be. But be patient, for none gives you patience but Allah. He's saying here that the source of patience, which he defines in the way that I have, is Allah. So it's not a quality that is intrinsic or sui generis. It's not a quality that exists in you as a human being. It's a quality that is bestowed, which you have to then bring to fruition. So he chose this ayah for that purpose. So that the root of what he's saying basically is that the root of all perfected virtues lie outside of the self. Inside the human being, they lie in the soul. In as much as the soul reflects the divine totality. It's a spark. You think of it as a spark. Think of it as a gigantic workplace, and a spark comes out. So that is the luminous quality. But the source of your ability to cope, to contain, to manage, while staying true to your goal, i.e. patience, is rooted in the divine names of Al-Sabur, for example, the all-patient. But if you look at it in more contemporary terms, rather than as a containment, and therefore it has many similarities, as it were, with the virtue of outer patience, but see it rather in terms of suspension of time, it becomes, I don't want to say profound, but more significant in terms of the wayfaring aspect.
So, but you say that suspension of time, that's very interesting. Can you just please you explained it, but it's really, really very enlightening. So what you're saying is actually suspension of time. So, time and space.
You see, Allah, the attribute, the divine attribute of the all-patient, cannot have in it the element of time. Time does not exist in the realm of the subtler realms. Subtler realms, there is no time. There's no place. So, when Allah gives the name of the all-patient to His reality, or an aspect of His reality, that name cannot include time. Time does not feature. So, the motor, as it were, the latent motor of patience inside the self, inside the person, is the soul. It has in it the faculties and the qualities from which the self draws its virtues. If you introduce the element of time into it, you are in some ways discourteous to the name of the all-patient. Because the all-patient is the elimination of time. I don't know, but Allah's the elimination of time leads to infinite patience. If, for example, just a very, very, very material example. Say you have a headache and you're supposed to be patient with it, right? Or you're patient with your wife or your husband or whatever, right? If time is not an element in it, you have infinite patience. Because it's not related to sequence of finite passages of units of time. So when the soul sends out its spark of patience to the self that wants to rise out of its animalism, as it were, to the higher realms, it sends the signal of be patient. But the signal that it sends does not have attached to it patience equals time. That's, you just sit and wait until trouble passes. It cannot have in it the element of time. So, the more you reduce time and actually practice it, be patient by reducing time, by reducing the implication of time, and you'll find that your patience grows enormously. Try it.
Can I say something
Need some
about
practice.
this?
So in other words, you just be in fact, then I'll bring in.
Then you go to phase 2. It's contentment.
Yeah, contentment, exactly. Because you're just content.
These are not plucked out of the blue.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why we decided to talk about this. By we, I mean collectively, not the royal we. There is a method to this.
Yeah.
One door leads. That's why they're doors.
Yeah.
Door, you go into a room, then you go through another door.
Yeah.
You can also go back. You shouldn't, but you can generally go forward. Or you're very happy where you are. One of the risks of contentment is that you're happy, you're contented with being contented. So you just stop. In which case he says you might as well lie down and have a snooze.
I just wanted to say that time is not what we think it is, because sometimes things pass and you say, where does the time go? So it means it's relative to your state, isn't it?
Very
Is
much
that-
so.
is
It's
that-
filtered, yeah.
So could I just tell you some personal experience? Because this
Floor is
is
yours.
the only thing this has ever happened to me, but because I don't claim anything. But when I was in Iran, I was coming back in the airport, and we went to give my passport, and they said your visa is out of date. And I said, oh, they said you have to go back into town and renew your visa, even though I was leaving. And that meant I'd missed the plane, and I was so frustrated. And my husband had to get the luggage back off the plane, and I was standing there waiting for the luggage, and I thought, you're supposed to be a Sufi and all that. Why can't you accept this? And so I started saying the La ilaha illallah, and suddenly everything disappeared. And I looked out of the window and I saw the mountain in Tehran. You know, it has a beautiful mountain when you can see it. And everything just disappeared. And in a minute, the luggage came back, and you know, we went back and did it, and it was amazing. And that's the only time it's ever happened to me, because, you know, but I would recommend reciting something like that, and then it just disappear.
What did you decide?
La ilaha illallah.
Yeah.
That means only God.
Yeah.
So what, it doesn't matter if I was delayed. You know. So, I mean, the time just sort of disappeared.
Yeah. Time will go. Time is meant to disappear. It's what we have to stand still with ourselves. Time will just go. This will also pass, as the Sufis say.
Yes, I mean, time will pass with time.
Yeah.
One more question there.
I realised that in stage 6, you come to obey the Sharia, presumably including the injunctions about standing up for the oppressed and defending the Muslim community under attack, for example. And there may be lots of other less crucial than more everyday examples, like if you see someone being insulted in the street, or you see someone who is desperately in need, you try and do something about it. You don't say to yourself, well, Allah intended this, this was meant to be. So I find a slight sort of jarring quality about the relationship between being content and accepting that where you've got to, if this is really the inner state that's being referred to, is perfect, because and your duties to Sharia, because one of the first things you feel if you are motivated to act, to undo or redress or combat some social wrong, is I am discontented about it. And from that I have a duty to do something about it. Now, is that kind of, what should I say, discontent in relation to dunya a problem? Or is the idea of contentment basically about your inner state and your degree of spiritual progress?
Now here, I think the inversion works the other way around. Contentment in the inner world may very well mean discontentment in the outer world.
Oh, okay, yeah,
It just inverted.
sure.
And in many ways it's true. The inversion is true.
Okay.
So you're contented with Allah's commands and decrees. But in your outer actions, you are not contented with the way that human beings interact with them.
Right.
So you can be extremely discontented in the outer world. Demonstrating, helping, doing all kinds of things that people do to overcome their unwillingness to accept outer conditions. But this can only work if there is inner contentment, total contentment. The risks of contentment on the journey, on the inner journey, is you're contented with contentment and you stay. This, by the way, is something that is, I won't say it's not allowed. Nothing is not allowed. This is your journey. But it's something that can be very, very counterproductive. if you have the capabilities of moving on, you must move on. You can't just stay because you're comfortable with it. Many people are comfortable with it. Some people cannot move beyond that, or do not have the ability to move beyond that. Then that's fine. They stop at that stage. But if you have the ability to move beyond that into the next stage, you must. Because then you are not obeying the injunction to expand to the limits of your capabilities. You have to expand to their limits, not work within them. You have not. There's always pushing the envelope. It's absolutely necessary in the spiritual world. But the opposite is absolutely true. I mean, some of the great figures. I keep on going back to this. Amir Abdul Qadir. He was in constant outer jihad, fighting sometimes impossible odds. This is 100 years ago, so it's within historical time. But his inner condition, as witnessed by a French spy who wrote about it, was such that it's unbelievable. I mean, the man was completely indifferent to his own being, but his outer action reflected this absolute contentment, but absolutely discontented also, and doing something about it. Sorry. Assalamu alaikum.
Is it a bit like when you are content, when you have this contentment, you also have the same feeling for Allah's decrees? You are content with them, and then you will be obedient. And when you see the Prophet's life and his obedience, there was times for action, defense, aid, support, and so on and so forth. So surely that inner contentment has to outwardly reflect actions in accordance with Allah's decrees. Would that be right?
Yes, no doubt about it. Absolutely no doubt. It demands it sometimes, even though you may not want to do it. It demands it. Because other names come to play. There's a demand. There's an insistence on bringing balance back, which is adl, which is justice. The root of justice is balance. Things, when they become out of balance, become unjust. You have to do something about it. Now, you should not do something about it that where it is clear to you that you cannot do anything about it. But when, again, there's a huge space as to what you can do.
What was the name of the person you mentioned?
Amir Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, the famous Algerian jihadist of the 19th century. He actually, just to go back to this point, he fought for 13 years. He was one of the greatest exponents of the school of Ibn Arabi in his. And then the odds became overwhelming. It was impossible for him to conduct his war, defensive war, against the might of an industrial machine, the French army. And once he realized that this is no longer the moment for picking up arms. He laid down his arms. Actually, he was betrayed, but ultimately he laid down his arms. He didn't call for it because the circumstances have changed completely. You can only do things that are appropriate. There's no point acting, as it were, in an adventurous fashion. You have to do things with foresight, with planning, and with knowledge that your actions, driven correctly, will be successful. But you have to also know when this action is not appropriate.
I don't quite get the ninth step. It's probably lexical because
Chivalry?
Egyptian
Yes.
the Torah does have qualities of chivalry and nobility, but it also has qualities of, in a sense, violence and
Yes.
thugs.
This is a social aspect.
Yes.
Yes. Futuwah turned into gangsterism.
Yes.
So if you now speak about Futuwah, it actually has two in Egypt and in Turkey, and not Turkey, but Egypt In Syria, it's gangsterism. Shaqi is a fata.
But they do.
Sorry.
They also do have certain qualities of chivalry.
Yes,
in their neighborhood,
yes.
So they're,
This is the social aspect of it, but this is what I talked about, the degradation of it. Before, if you go to 150 years ago, it is the heart of the guild system, but it's degraded. And in the process, it gave rise to these neighborhood gangs, some of whom protect the neighborhood, so it's like the mafia. They have few good qualities, I suppose. But you're right, I mean, it is not a modern term. So you cannot use it colloquially now and expect people to respond to its inner qualities. Mm-hmm. But in pre-modern times, this is a commonly used word for nobility and chivalry.
and how is that related to the people of the cave?
They're called fatas, they're called youth, the noble youth. The Prophet Ibrahim is called fata. Which ayah is that?
إنهم فتية من سورة الكهف.
No, لكن Nabi Allah Ibrahim was called. It had the Fatuwa guilds were basically means of organizing craft guilds in the high period of the Islamic Empire. But this is their outer form. The inner form, it related to the qualities of nobility and chivalry. And the famous saying, "La fata illa Ali, la sayf illa bil fiqar," is to do with the fatuwa. But now, as he said,
is it the same as Pahlevan or Jawan Mardi?
Jawan Mardi in Iran, yes. Akhi.
About 100 years ago, there were the streets. We didn't have any police, and was these Pahlevans, they were organizing all the streets?
Yes, that's in its out of the Turks call it Akhis, the Akhi system. But Jawan Mardi is the Iranian version.
Do you know of any works in English that explore the guild system, Islamic guild system?
Yes, but that's about 100 years ago. It's so archaic. Victorian English, if you want to read it. There's a man called von Flugel who wrote about it.
Sure. Yes, here
and Hartman. But there are a number of studies. The one who has written most about them is a person called, also Qamar actually, but he's Bangladeshi, works in the United States, he teaches at Boston College. He wrote a book on Fatuwa. Qamar al-Arifin, Qamar. I can send you the actual Arifi. It's not Qamar. Sorry.
The second degree, the last bit,
Yes.
and to apologize to one who is causing you harm. So what is the apology?
It's a form of disarming a person. It's a form of an unexpected action. I mean, I can give you the Arabic, maybe my translation of the Arabic is, but I think it's الثانية أن تقرب من يقصيك وتكرر من يؤذيك وتعتذر إلى من يجني عليك سماحا لا كظما وطيبا لا مصابرة وتعتذر إلى من يجني, and you apologize to one who's hurting you.
You haven't done anything wrong.
Well, then this is not Fatuwa. Fatuwa is in the process of expressing to him or showing him the finer qualities of your noble character. The person will maybe deflect or refrain from his actions and consider why he's doing it. Of course, I mean, this doesn't mean that you apologize to a thief with a gun to your head, No. But and the apology should not be seen as sort of a vocal or verbal apology. Maybe it's an inner apology. It's a kind of forgiveness, yes.
I remember the story of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, which there was a guy who came to his city and started to shouting at him and just started to like saying very bad word and this sort of thing. And Imam Hassan just been calm and listened to him, and then he finished. Then he told him, "I'm sorry if I made you any like problem or caused you any harm. Do you like? Who are you? If you don't have anyone in this city, just come to my house. I speak to you. I mean, if anything I have done wrong to you, just let me know." So, and this guy, after hearing that, he just turned back and just hit me. That was one of the best part of Imam Hassan and this stuff. So, although he didn't know him at all.
I mean, there are many stories, I think most of them true, about the fatal qualities of Imam Ali, for example. There's a famous story where in the battle he's about to kill someone. And this person, he was standing on his neck about to stab him, cut his head off. He spat at him. So the Imam, instead of killing him, he threw away his sword. He said, "Well, what are you doing?" He says, "If I would kill you, I would kill you out of anger. And I cannot kill you out of anger." Of course, the next story is that the man became Muslim. So.
We have somebody waiting here.
Oh, sorry, Abdulla.
Hoping that you can help clarify something for me. I found it very useful, your commentary on time. I also found it very useful the way in which you discussed the way that the states lead as gateways into each other. And I was thinking specifically of the second degree of the seventh state and the following eighth state, and the relationship between tentativeness and diffidence. Thinking a little bit about what you're saying about time, I was wondering whether or not there's some kind of relationship as well in regards to these two states in relation to space, because the active space within any ethical code is self, and the denial of self in a way leads to both tentativeness and diffidence. If I cannot believe in my own judgment, if I am aware that there is a greater judge, then I will have a certain modesty, a certain containment, a certain uncertainty. And I was just wondering whether or not I got it right in thinking about that relationship between these two states and the way that one opens up into the next.
Absolutely. Spot on. There might be some typos in because I did this in a bit of a hurry this afternoon, so if you find the typos, please correct them.
We will forgive him.
That's very noble of you.
Can I just say something about this giving preference to others? Doesn't it require some discrimination because one doesn't want to end up as a doormat?
Yes, that's what Ansari says, is that you have to be selective in it. But I think the process of being selective introduces the element of choice, and therefore the best preference to have is to prefer what Allah prefers.
Yes.
Could it not also be argued that if someone becomes a doormat because they don't actually wish to be a doormat, but they see nothing else that...
Inverted.
But it's really, I think that's really interesting about this, because the English words don't sound very dynamic, but the way you introduced it, like with the creativity and even the word fatah, with the youth, it seems to me really dynamic, all of these sort of states. And I think that's, to me, it feels very healing, because I feel that many of our cultures and societies have become so stagnant and burdened by kind of like very fixated ideas of right and wrong. And this is really sort of like so much about, it sounds to me anyway, about, the intention and action being in a very dynamic relationship, and about kind of boundaries and holding back, but also, you know, moving and acting. I really like that. I really appreciate that.